Now, if the Liberal Democrats wanted to hear one thing from their leader, Nick Clegg, at their conference in Brighton this afternoon, it was reassurance that the pain being inflicted on them by being in coalition with the Conservatives would one day turn out to have been worth it. The party's opinion poll ratings are dismal, and many Lib Dem activists still seem to find it hard to believe that they've ended up in a government that's trying to cut public expenditure by record amounts. Mr Clegg told them they do have much to be proud of.
We cut taxes for ordinary families and made sure the wealthiest paid their fair share. We put more money in schools to give every child a chance. We did everything possible to get people into work, millions of new jobs and more apprenticeships than ever before. And we did the right thing by older people too, the biggest ever cash rise in the state pension. But most importantly, we brought our economy back from the brink and put it on the right path.
Well, for years, Lib Dems have complained that people weren't voting for them on the grounds that they didn't think the party would ever win power. Unkind critics used to say that a vote for the Lib Dems was a dustbin or a wasted vote. Well, now they are in power, admittedly as the junior partner in a coalition, and their leader told them it's time to get used to it.
The past is gone, and it isn't coming back. If voters want a party of opposition, a stop the world, I want to get off party, they've got plenty of options. But we are not one of them. There's a better, more meaningful future waiting for us. There's a better, more meaningful future waiting for us. Not as the third party, but as one of three parties of government.
But he did hark back to the past with one line in his speech that borrowed two of the best-known lines from his predecessors, Joe Grimmond, nearly 50 years ago, David Steele, more than 30 years ago.
I see generations of Liberals marching towards the sound of gunfire. And yes, I see them going back to their constituencies to prepare for government. It took us a while, but we got there in the end.
Well, it was Joe Grimmond who spoke of leading his troops towards the sound of gunfire back in 1963, and it was David Steele who exhorted his followers to prepare for government in 1981. But what did the Lib Dems of 2012 make of Nick Clegg's exhortations and of his announcement that another of his predecessors, Paddy Ashdown, will be leading the party's election campaign team in 2015? Well, our political correspondent Ross Hawkins was in the conference hall for the leader's speech, and he got some quick reactions.
Nick Clegg's just finished. He's walked off to the applause and the music. People are coming out. I've got Gordon King, who's come here from Wiltshire, and Tricia Rigg. Gordon, it was an austere message. He told you all about the things that would be difficult, not necessarily popular. Does that send you away with a spring in your step?
First of all, let's be realistic. Things are difficult, things are austere. We know they are. People are experiencing tough times, but Nick did highlight a number of real changes and real differences that we've made to people's lives, form a bedrock for future prosperity of people. So we are greatly encouraged.
And Tricia, a huge cheer for Paddy Ashdown. Is there a bit of this party that would quite like to go back to the days of Paddy Ashdown in opposition, where it was just that bit easier to follow your beliefs and not have to compromise with the Conservatives?
No, I think people are a lot happier than you say we are. You keep insisting that we're unhappy at the moment. We're not. We have things to do, a lot to do, because of the mess that's been left us.
But he's very keen, isn't he, on the idea of fighting with the Conservatives over some things like the environment. That does get a bigger cheer than austerity.
Well, maybe. People are aware. Obviously, they're not happy about the austerity, but it's got to be done. We can't have anything else.
And Gordon, if we end up still 6 months before an election with polling in single figures, around about 8, 9, 10 points, are people just going to sit there and let this leader lead them possibly to a clunking defeat at the next election?
No, Nick Clegg is showing good leadership, very strong leadership. He's still very popular within the party. Yes, we need to keep him under pressure. We have very great core values. The environment is amongst them. They are Liberal Democrat red lines, which we will absolutely insist must be taken into account in government, and we will make sure that they are. And Nick Clegg, providing he continues to deliver on those Liberal Democrat values, will be assured of a good future.
Tricia, you go home now. What's your mood?
One of optimism.
Because? How optimistic? You're in single figures in the polls. People predicting your demise. You could be down to a rump of 6 MPs. You've got all this austerity to impose. Why are you optimistic?
Because we know what we're doing, we know where we're going, and believe we'll succeed.
Gordon?
And we've been there before, and we no doubt go back there again. So the only way is up.
Liberal Democrat activists in Brighton talking to Ross Hawkins. So that's the first of this year's main party conferences over, and the first of the party leaders to have survived internal rumblings of discontent. So let's take stock of where the storm-swept Brighton conference has left Nick Clegg and the Lib Dems. With me here in the studio are Mark Pack, co-editor of the website Liberal Democrat Voice, and Lance Price, former Director of Communications for the Labour Party. And we're joined from our radio car by Matthew Parris, political commentator of The Times. Mark Pack, these leaders' speeches at the annual conference do matter. Nick Clegg, did he silence the rumblings?
I think he did a pretty good job with that. There are really two speeches wrapped into one always with these, those aimed at the internal party audience and those aimed at the broader public audience. I think for the internal party audience, there was a lot there to cheer people, not just the appointment of Paddy Ashdown as General Election Campaign
Chair.
Chair,
The biggest cheer, though.
Indeed, slightly embarrassingly, perhaps, that none of the policy announcements got a bigger cheer, Paddy's appointment, but that was a very popular move. But also substantive stuff in terms of the environment, in terms of greener growth, in terms of extra support for kids for the most disadvantaged households. But the key message, I think, for the wider world was that the Liberal Democrats still think going into government and being in government is a reason for the party existing, and that the party is doing an awful lot to try to make the tax system fairer. Sometimes stopped by George Osborne, so not always quite getting our way, but doing an awful lot, particularly on the basic income tax allowance, taking millions of people out of income tax altogether.
Matthew Parris, you're an aficionado of these things. You've watched and listened to countless leaders' speeches at annual conferences. How did you rate this one?
Well, I'll make a bet. I may be wrong. I think this may prove the most successful of the three party leaders' speeches, of which this is the first, and two still have to come. I thought Nick Clegg did really brilliantly. I thought your interviews with Liberal Democrat Party members reflected very accurately those to whom I've spoken. That there is a feeling that the Lib Dems are in this sink or swim, that it's the right thing to do. I don't think your analysis that they want to be persuaded that this is going to lead them to a better result at the next general election is right. I think they understand that it may lead them to a worse result at the next general election, but Nick Clegg persuaded them and has persuaded them and did in his speech today that it was the right thing for the party to do, and it was a tour de force of a speech.
That would be quite an achievement to persuade
made.
party members that doing worse in an election was some kind of triumph.
Yeah, well, he didn't quite say that, but in the back of their minds, none of them really think they're going to do better at the next election than they did at the last. What they wanted to be told was that what they were doing was right for the country and right for the party, not in the electoral sense, but that the party was backing the right side. I thought he did that really well. It was a strong, unrepentant, convinced performance, as I say, the best that he's ever made. There's this little bit of a feeling at this conference, I've felt, that we may all be going down, but we're all going to go down together, and we're going down together in the right cause.
Well, not quite all of us, because Lance Price, of course, Labour remains in opposition. I wondered whether you, listening to Nick Clegg's speech, recognised quite a lot of the tone. We must no longer be satisfied to be in opposition. We are now a party of government. I've heard that before at Labour conferences.
Yeah, there was more there that you've heard at Labour conferences. I mean, he was claiming that they were the only party who could be trusted on the economy and to deliver a fairer society. That's almost a new Labour slogan.
Could have come straight from Tony Blair's mouth.
Straight from Tony Blair. I disagree with Matthew fundamentally on this. I thought that was a terrible, terrible speech. I think that there'll be barely a line that anybody will remember tomorrow, and certainly in a week's time there'll be nothing that anybody can remember of it. I thought it was superficial, I thought it was disingenuous, I thought it was dishonest. And frankly, the only good thing to be said for it was that it was about half the length of most party conference speeches.
Mark Pack, well, that is an advantage, I agree. Mark Pack, to what extent do you believe that the Liberal Democrats as a party have now got used to the idea that they're a party of government?
Very much so, and one thing that didn't happen at conference but was nonetheless notable for its absence is there was no real push to say we shouldn't be in government, that maybe being in opposition or some confidence and supply arrangement would be better. Huge debates about how to get the most out of being in government and how to make sure that being in government ends up being a success and not a disaster for the party. But the idea of being in government actually the party really rather likes, because you see Liberal Democrat ministers implementing Liberal Democrat measures, and you may not like the Conservative measures the Conservative ministers implement, but it's, particularly for party activists who've been around for a long time, it is such a change from what the party has been used to in the past. And I've been really struck how I come across really nobody who says, oh, it was just so much nicer in opposition, couldn't we go back to that?
It would have been easy, wouldn't it, Matthew Parris, for Liberal Democrats, not just Mr Clegg but others as well, to have got easy cheers, easy rounds of applause by hitting the Conservatives, who, for many Liberal Democrats, remain the main opponents. Now, they seem by and large to have avoided doing that.
Yes, to a degree, Vince Cable did a bit of that on Monday.
But he had a pleb joke, didn't he?
Yeah, that was fine, but he didn't take it too far. It's been a terrifically mature conference. It's been a little bit glum, a little bit gloomy, and we've all been lashed by the rain and the wind. But that, on the whole, I think it's been a rather more mature party conference than you might expect from the Conservatives. I think we'll probably get from the Tories a lot of Lib Dem bashing of a rather cheap kind, which you actually didn't find echoed, so to speak, against the Tories by the Lib Dems this time. There's a really strong feeling on the part of the party that they did the right thing in entering the government, they're doing the right thing in staying in the government, that it's going to make them very unpopular, and that Nick Clegg, although he's never going to be carried from the conference hall on everybody's shoulders, Nick Clegg has been doing the right thing. The really strong and mature sense of doing things in the national interest this time.
So, Lance Price, where does that leave the Labour opposition? Does it give them an opportunity to say, there is now only one thing for you to do if you don't like this government, you've got to vote Labour?
I think it does do that, although that isn't sufficient in my view, and I think Ed Miliband would be very foolish to think that simply because of the unpopularity of both coalition parties and the fact that Nick Clegg tied himself ever more closely to the coalition and made it absolutely clear that he's not wavering from his commitment to the coalition, that somehow is enough to propel Labour into office at the next election. That would be a huge tactical mistake on behalf of Ed Miliband. So we'll have to see what he makes of his speech next week, of course, which is the next one that we'll be discussing on this programme. Interesting that the only thing that really made me smile in the speech, I mean, there was that awful joke about you need yellow to make green go blue go green.
Oh yeah, this was to do with the Tories' environmental credentials.
That's right.
Vote blue go green, and you need a bit of yellow. You could only make blue go green by adding yellow. That just made me think of a little boy peeing in the swimming pool. I mean, it's just the one thing that did make me smile was he says the past is gone and it isn't coming back, and then about 30 seconds later he announces that Lord Ashdown, who is the past and clearly hasn't gone, is going to be chairing their campaign for the next general election. But as you pointed out,
and Lord Ashdown, who was very much in favour, of course, as we know from his memoirs, and I was there in Downing Street at the time, passionately committed to a Lib-Lab coalition in the past, and was very,
Maybe it's
very
a sign of how things have changed. That
personally.
was the past, now he's the future. We shall see. For now, we shall leave it there. Matthew Parris, Lance Price, Mark Pack, thank you all very much.